Washington is hiring Jedd Fisch as its next coach.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies, Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the post Jedd Fisch era at Washington. We really appreciate that. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Lars Hanson. So we were just saying this before we just said we need to do this on the show. We need to do this live. So Jedd Fisch. This is all things that we were trying to get out beforehand, but this is the best hire that Washington possibly could have made in the scenario that Kalen DeBoer put them in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the key with the last part, right? Because if this happened in October, right? Like let's say you fire Jimmy Lake, or you fire Jimbo Fisher at they did at Texas A&M midseason, right. You have the whole kind of rest of the year to scope things out. Jedd Fisch, and honestly, even in a normal search, Jedd Fisch would probably still be one of your top 3 choices. Again, maybe he's not your top 1 choice, but the work that Jedd Fisch has done with the, shall we say, limited resources at Arizona in comparison to Washington and maintained it, that's the key for me, because it wasn't just, hey, you can get a couple nice recruits because, you'll offer X amount in NIL. It was also that you could do something with it. And it's kind of ironic now that we look back on it that the Arizona game was kind of that fork in the road game for Washington where, hey, for a few weeks there after that game, it was like, I don't know, they squeaked past Arizona. I don't know about that. And then it's like by the end of the season, no, Arizona was a dog of a program. That was a unit. They just had to get going to get to that point. And at that point, when they faced Washington, Noah Fifita was just now becoming the starter. So at that point, they weren't full-fledged into what they became.
So that's a fantastic point, because I know you and I had this conversation at some point. I know I had this conversation with some other people around the program, not like with the program, but like around the program, a bunch of fans that I've talked to, where it was, would you rather see Oregon again than Arizona? Like it got to that point. It was because what Jedd Fisch was building was so impressive. So right off the top, before we dive into staff, before we dive into possible portal transfers from Arizona, before we dive into all of that. And one of the questions here is, it says, is this 100%? We're basically like at the same point where it was with Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. It does sound like Jedd Fisch is meeting with his team here in the next couple of hours to have the announcement of coming to Washington. So it seems like we're in that range where it's as close to 100% without the ink being on the paper. So we feel comfortable putting all this out there, having that discussion. But let's first of all talk about Jedd Fisch, because one of the concerns that I know you and I have both seen surrounding him is, well, he doesn't stay in one place very long. Football Scoop is reporting, it just came out, and that was one of the things we were kind of waiting on before we went live, is Football Scoop is reporting that this deal will be around $9 million a year. So that means a couple of things for the program. First one means Washington is willing to go out and spend a whole lot of money, because this is probably not as much, but in the same realm of what they would have given Kalen DeBoer, what Troy Dannen was willing to give Kalen DeBoer. But also this means that there's going to be a gigantic buyout. And of course, this is not final, but this is just what's being reported. And it seems like it would be pretty close to where it would be. That would mean a gigantic buyout, which would pump a whole bunch of money into the program if he were to leave for, I know he's a Florida alum, so let's say that Florida wants to hire him back. That would be a whole lot of money coming to the program that you could put to good use. So this all feels like a fantastic starting point, and it's what you and I discussed the other day after Kalen DeBoer had left. It's Troy Dannen was brought in here to be a big boy and make big boy hires. And this is exactly what that is.
And it's better, honestly, than the route of, let's say, even before Willie Fritz took the Houston job. Like if he had brought Willie Fritz from Tulane, right? You're going and getting a Jamie Chadwell, right? Like I threw that name out there as like the 4th or 5th option. I think in the tweet it was the 3rd option, but you go with Jedd Fisch was always kind of the A1, A2 candidate, where it's like it's either him or Lance Leipold, and that sounds like what it came down to in the end. I mean, I know Chris Kleiman was discussed at one point or another, but I think pretty clear on it was either Leipold or Fisch. So the fact that Dannen didn't have to get a bunch of no's, right? Like I don't know, it's kind of late in the process. Because to be fair to the other coaches, right? You could easily say, hey, it's already past signing day. I know it's kind of I know you got put in a tough spot, but I can't be the one to then put somebody else in a tough spot. It takes a lot to get somebody out of a job this late in the process.
Yep.
So obviously financially.
Sorry, I just want to add on to that a little bit because I want to get you back to your point, but not just get them out of a job. Get them out of a job where going to the Big 12, they could potentially win that conference next season. Because what you were just saying, they were building a monster down there, and now this is exactly what from a program that in similar scenario to what Washington was in 2021 was in the dumps, was terrible, was a 1-win team, and now we see where they are now, and he could do a lot of great things. No, I'm sorry, please continue.
Right. Well, and just to carry on to your point, the fact that he's now going to have a lot more resources. I think, first of all, the fact that Arizona could never pay their head coach $9 million a year. That's just not. What do you think they probably get?
That's financial situation, yeah.
But right, so like you think they could maybe get to 5 or 6 like that, because that's where Leipold, or at least I know Kleiman was. I think Kleiman's at 5. Lance is near that as well. So the fact that, and you know what the crazy thing is? Correct me if I'm wrong on this. DeBoer is going to make under 9 at Alabama.
Yeah, I believe it's like 8.4 or something like that. It was like a double of what he was making at
So
UW.
Jedd Fisch now outgaining Kalen DeBoer. Like you gotta have to give a little tip of the cap there. Like, hey, I know Jedd Fisch doesn't have the same agent as Kalen DeBoer, but that is kind of a unique little twist in all this, where it's like, hey, you're going to take less money for a perceived better job. Jedd Fisch now taking more money at a perceived better job. So I think kind of everyone's kind of just moving up in the world, and that's the key here, is where you're not trying to go with this is a young offensive coordinator hire that is a rising star, and Garrett Riley, for example, right? Somebody like that, a Jeff Levy. I guess now he's at Mississippi State, I believe. But giving these younger offensive coordinators, or even Ryan Grubb, right? We saw Saturday night that Grubb said. And by the way, I just need to get this off my chest, because I'm sure you got asked this too. The number of people that said, "How do we know he was offered the job or wanted the job?" Directly responding to that tweet with the note that said, "As much as I wanted to be the next Washington head coach, I won't be, or I didn't get the job." That's basically what I think. It's like 5th or 6th sentence in, and I know he wrote it in all caps, and people were like, "Why is he screaming?" It's like, well, it's just easier to see that, and it doesn't come off as passive if you're just writing some small little 100-word note.
Right.
But Ryan Grubb said he wanted the job. So credit to Troy Dannen for giving him at least a look and saying, all right, how would this look? I do think it kind of worked against Grubb that all the players graduated / declared for the draft this year, because last year everyone would have rallied around him and said, hey, no, this is the guy, promote this guy. We want, the players would have really, and it's not that they didn't get behind it, but I think that peak of emotion to now bottom of the basement, with national championship to 25% of the team showing up for DeBoer's team meeting at the end, that kind of showed you where the program was at. Jedd Fisch is now somebody where you see the offense, you see what he can do. He's been a head coach before. He's been even in the NFL. So he has connections. He knows how to run a program. And if you look at the
recruiter too.
Exactly. And I think that to me is what separates this, because again, what was the knock on Kalen DeBoer? Can't recruit.
Recruiting. Yeah.
And one thing that Jedd Fisch has prided himself on is recruiting, building from high school, sprinkling in some portal guys, which I'm sure he'll do at Washington, but really truly investing in this, the high school recruiting rate. I honestly think he's going to do that in the state of Washington too.
So I agree with you there. And we're going to talk about roster turnover. We're going to talk about all those things right after a quick break. And we're going to send a message to our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explorer tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. And, I'm going to give the same just easy betting advice for anybody who, has the FanDuel app and is looking to make a fun little bet. Josh Allen, anytime touchdown in tomorrow's Bills-Steelers game. I feel like that's just a given if you want to make a couple of bucks there. So, Lars, let's talk about Jedd Fisch as a recruiter and what he might be able to bring with him to UW. Let's just expand about that, because you were making a great point. We know we had to take a quick break there, but let's get back to that, because over the last couple of days, we've seen Noah Carter decommit from Washington. Top recruit, top 100 player, 4-star edge rusher. We saw Keona Wilhite decommit a little while ago, somebody who was previously committed to Jedd Fisch at Arizona. So we'll see how that might work out. Austin Mack entered his name in the transfer portal, 4-star quarterback who you and I are both really, really high on. And there are a lot of guys that are in the transfer portal that, could decide to, okay, yeah, let me give this guy a chance. Let me see what happens. There's a possibility there. There are a whole bunch of guys at Arizona who now have the opportunity to hit the transfer portal, maybe say, hey, I like what Coach Fisch was building. Let me go do that with him at Washington, because we saw what kind of program that was. They were just in the national championship. Maybe we can get back to that, because that was very clearly going to be a goal for that team in Tucson this year. So maybe, let's see what we can do with that up at Washington. We talk about guys like Noah Fifita, Tetairoa McMillan, Jonah Coleman, the running back, who I'm really high on. I know our buddy Ben Glassmeyer is really high on their right tackle, when there are a whole bunch of needs now on this roster from guys that have hit the portal, where maybe, hey, you can look at Arizona and it's, the sad reality of college football, where, this is exactly what Washington fans were complaining about a couple of days ago with Kalen DeBoer, where it's, man, this is the Wild West. It sucks that he left, and now he's going to pick this roster clean, where now Jedd Fisch could potentially do the same thing at the University of Arizona. And that's just the sad reality of college football. But with that being said, who do you want off of Arizona's roster?
Right, exactly. I'm actually, writing a story on that that'll be up on Inside the Huskies either later today or Sunday, literally entitled "Going Fishing," which Arizona players could be head of the watch. And it's one of those where, it sounds cruel, and I got lambasted by Texas people for this when I tweeted out that Chris Warren was likely going to transfer if things didn't improve at Texas way back when. And now we're literally like that. That's a sport. Like The Athletic, 247, all these people are monitoring the transfer portal, because guys are just always considering their options. So maybe some of us were ahead of the curve in that regard.
Right.
But with that being said, to your point, obviously you start with, there has to be a McMillan on this roster next year. It just kind of feels just, right? It just somehow, some way you need a McMillan. So Tetairoa McMillan, I'm going to leave the first name pronunciation to you, but I'm going to try.
Tetairoa
McMillan, T McMillan, T-Mac.
T-Mac, there you go.
I'm a big fan of Tracy McGrady, but no, him and Noah Fifita, I have to imagine Fifita probably more likely, just based on the position and of need, because you're looking at Washington's roster. Dylan Morris gone, Austin Mack now in the portal, Penix gone,
Will Rogers back in the portal.
Well, right, great run, legacy run there, but probably will end up at Alabama. Would not be surprised to see him end up there just to compete. People that think Jalen Milroe is going to win the job down there, I don't know about that. But for now at Washington, there's also going to be players that are in the portal. When you look, Arizona signed 8 guys out of the portal last year. One of them was Justin Flo, a linebacker, former 5-star. So he's able to clearly go and get elite talent, or at least, perceive because again, when you look at their recruiting classes, a lot of it is 3-star U, right? Hey, we're taking these guys that are 3 stars and trying to coach them up into 4 stars. In a way that is also kind of like Washington, right? Where Washington has never been that destination 5-star school. Even Kalen DeBoer, who got them to a national championship, wasn't a destination 5-star head coach. Now he's going to try and find out if he is at Alabama. Jedd Fisch equally can prove, or at least try and get into that upper echelon, right? And I think his prowess as a recruiter gives more credence to that than the last couple of coaches, even in a way like Chris Peterson, because the personality, real quick side story. To connect to John Stamos reference that I had yesterday on the show, and I believe I said this before on the show, but just for clarification, now that Jedd is 99.9% chance. I believe there's actually a private jet headed from Tucson to Boeing Field. Yeah. So, and ironically made same trip from Boeing to Tucson on Wednesday. Around about the same time, Greg Byrne flew into Seattle to meet with Kalen DeBoer. So for all the Husky fans that were saying Kalen DeBoer left UW with a cold shoulder, Troy Dannen knew this was coming, folks. I promise you, Troy is not that oblivious to think, wow, I've offered this guy 9 point whatever million. I'm just going to say 9 point because it wasn't 10, but it wasn't 9. So do what you will there with the number. For about a month now, he hasn't signed it. There's got to be another shoe falling here. Oh, Nick Saban retired. Oh, Kalen, you're lit. Oh, okay. All right, whatever. See ya. Like at that point of the, at that point of the, and also when you're getting a $12 million buyout from Alabama, that does help both the new coach getting his buyout, maybe investing more in him. So that could be part of it as well. You know, does Jedd Fisch strike you as a $9 million coach? I think upper 8. You know, now, but again, with the resources that he's going to have at Washington and his personality. So to finish that John Stamos reference, when we were at Pac-12 Media Day, the coaches kind of break off and do their own little table one-on-one after going to the podium, or in this case, sitting down with Yogi Roth and Ashley Adamson on stage at a casino. So that was shout out to the Pac-12 for doing that, because that was just a weird dynamic to work with.
That's a very odd dynamic.
But and actually, like as you're walking into the room for the stage, you're basically walking into a strip club. Is what it felt like. You know, and I don't frequent strip clubs.
I think we should probably this is a whole other side podcast.
The reference of John Stamos as Jedd Fisch was going to the stage, I was like, has anybody ever told you look like John Stamos? And he just like started cracking up. He's like, no, but you get the first 2 questions. And so he has that personality, that relatable. That there's a huge tie-in here, right? The recruiting comes from his personality. He's not fake. He's not. And again, in this day and age of college football, it's hard to be a real, truly genuine person, right? But his coaching prowess and his personality seems like a perfect fit at Washington. Troy Dannen clearly recognized that, and I think Husky fans, as they start to get to know Jedd Fisch a little bit, don't look necessarily at the record, right? Because the record isn't what Kalen DeBoer was, right? You're not really going to get those coaches every now and then. But his recruiting prowess makes up for his lack of record, and I think that's what's going to tip the scales moving forward.
So you're absolutely right there. And then let's talk about that added benefit of resources, where Troy Dannen, because the contract, the rumored contract is a big part of this, but we know that Troy Dannen was brought in to continue to feed the football program and to continue to invest money into the football program. And we've seen it pay. We saw just, you know, we didn't see everything that's going to happen with it, but we've seen the start of what's going on. And we see where it could be going over the next couple of seasons. So I think that this is a really promising just start for Jedd Fisch, where everything that he's going to have once he gets to Washington in terms of the NIL backing, in terms of the recruiting prowess that he's already proven to have, now going to a Big Ten school and leveling up per se into this Power 2 conference. There's just a lot to be excited about.
Well, and think about who he had. Granted that they didn't sign, but that he had. I believe didn't Elijah Rushing commit to them at one point? Wasn't that it? So like the fact that again now he didn't sign, right? But again, when you look at Arizona and you look at kind of
we all know why. Let's be real here.
No, but those resources are now there, or at least more so. And if he can massage the boosters and maybe get a little more of that from the high school ranks versus what UW wanted to do under DeBoer, which is more portal, and you can kind of see the understanding of why coaches want to do one or the other. You have to do both, but DeBoer was more leaning towards the portal. I think Fisch might be a little bit more open to high school doing that, which honestly is kind of to your point of, well, hey, if these guys are staying for 3 or 4 years and we're winning, it's worth the investment. They're not going to go to – you're not leaving Washington for Alabama as a player. Like, look, that's just not – I believe in the transfer portal era, nobody has done that. So, like, it's not like, hey, once these players get good, now they're leaving and going to Georgia and whatnot. No, those guys are signing with them out of high school and then developing it. That's exactly what Jedd Fisch is going to do at Washington.
So there's a lot to be excited about with Jedd Fisch at Washington, But we're going to transition to talking about the staff and what kind of staff he's going to build, because the recruiting aspect of that is really important. There are so many exciting pieces of what he could potentially build and what we saw that he was already building at Arizona. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. And we're going to give a shout out to our friends over at Jase Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if a member of my family or one of my friends got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from the life-saving medication they needed. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses. Because these things can happen to any of us. Visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. So I see some nice comments here talking about Arizona's staff. One guy that I'm really curious about. We don't really have. I'm sure you might have a staff list on hand, but 2 coaches, because there are rumors that Jamarcus Shepard will be off to Alabama. It sounds like that's going to happen. So Washington might need an entirely new coaching staff through all this. But the first 2 guys that I would be curious about, the wide receivers coach and the defensive line coach, and then right after that, defensive backs. Because Arizona's defense was really, really impressive the more the year went along. And we saw a lot of really impressive development from those guys. That defensive line was really, really strong. And especially with some of the younger guys that I know you and I are big fans of along that defensive line, that this could end up being a really, really good move for the Huskies, just in terms of this recruiting staff, or just recruiting and on-field staff. Because one thing that you and I talked about on yesterday's show, or excuse me, this morning's show, was the fact that Kalen DeBoer already had a top 15 salary in terms of assistant coaching pool. Now, maybe with this increased investment in Jedd Fisch, that an assistant salary pool can be leveled up too. And so Jedd Fisch can bring a couple of guys with him from Arizona, maybe look around the country and just say, oh, hey, I really like this guy, or I really like that guy, and bring in a couple other of top tier hires that can really help round out the staff and make it one of the best in the country, which he already proved that he was building.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest name is Brennan Carroll, the offensive line coach and offensive coordinator. I mean, that is without question. I think, and also, again, for as many Husky fans that didn't want to see Scott Huff leave, you kind of, it's like, okay, same with Kalen. It's like similar to Kalen, where it's like, okay, you're going to Bama. Okay, you're kind of like, it's almost like going from college to the pros, right? Now you're going from Arizona, the high school level, to Washington, the college level. You know, again, no slight to Arizona there, but it's like that's the bump that he would be getting, right?
Sure.
He certainly would no doubt be coming with Jedd Fisch now that Scott Huff is gone. And that kind of makes it easy. And I will say, Parker Brailsford had a fantastic relationship with Brennan Carroll, so I think there's no question that those 2 will link up again, and Parker's not going to hit the port. Because that, again, when you're starting to look at pieces that you can bring off of Arizona's roster, you also do want to keep some pieces on Washington's roster.
Right.
I mean, and it's like, this isn't Deion Sanders where it's like, hey, we're not going to take Arizona's roster and bring it over here. It's like, yeah, you don't really want to do that.
So that's why I started at wide receiver, because you talk about Parker Brailsford, awesome name. Obviously, that's the guy you want to keep around. But when you look at the wide receivers on this roster, Jeremiah Hunter still hasn't gone anywhere. Jeremy Bernard, Denzel Boston, like that trio right there. And then, maybe you can add in a Tetairoa McMillan, where that we talked about Washington's wide receivers maybe not falling off as big of a cliff anyways before all of this happened. But, you bring in a guy like that, you're able to bring in a top tier wide receivers coach. When you just look at some of these other guys, there's a lot to like there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the more that you start to kind of go down, there's a couple of interesting names, right? So Johnny Nansen, worth noting, is moved on to Texas. So
yeah,
he's out, and I don't think you want Nansen coming back to Washington anyways. There's two other former Washington coaches who were with Sark at Washington, and also then one of which stayed on for Chris Peterson's staff.
Shout out Jordan Pow.
So tight ends coach, and I believe also special teams coordinator. Yes, yeah. Jordan Pow, and passing game / quarterbacks coach Jimmy Doherty. I believe one of the 2 will come, maybe both. I think to me, the more I don't know, because we saw what happened with Jamarcus Shepard, right? Where he was he was not a part of the DeBoer tree and ended up just kind of being lightning in a bottle, right? After Junior Adams left to go to Oregon. So the question is, do you go kind of look around the sport? Does Jedd Fisch have a name, or I forgot what is. I don't know if T. Martin was still there with the Seahawks, but I know for a long time he was on Pete Carroll's staff as the wide receivers coach. That whole staff got let go, not just Pete Carroll. So there's also, with the Brennan Carroll connection, Pete Carroll, maybe you have like a senior defensive analyst sort of thing going on there.
Shout out to AWD says bring Pete Carroll in as the defensive coordinator.
I was going to say not a terrible idea because he's still getting all the money from being let go by the Seahawks. So money's not really.
He still wants to coach.
Still hanging. And think about it. He wouldn't have to be the head coach because and carry all the duties and all that stuff, but he still gets to be around ball and he gets to coach with his son.
Oh yeah,
and has worked with Jedd Fisch, so clearly would have no problem. Like, hey, Jedd, do your thing. I'm 72, man. And here's the key with this: who is not staying with him and coming to Washington? Dwayne Akina, the special team, not special teams, the secondary, kind of former Stanford legendary defensive backs coach. He is now moving on to be an analyst at Texas. So in a way, it's like, who's the old guy in the room that can provide some wisdom on defense? I can easily see a role being carved out somehow for Pete Carroll. Like in some manner of role. The more you think about it, it makes sense. He clearly wants to be involved. Who was coincidentally on the sideline pregame before Boise State? That really, I still don't have a reason why he was there.
I'm honestly forgetting who you're talking about.
It was Cam Chancellor.
Oh, that's right.
And it was so random, right? There was no like logical aside from that.
That's Cam Chancellor,
right? And it's like. DB coach, future DB coach, Gerald Alexander comes to mind, sort of thing, and so like that's another name that I'm sure could be brought up for a defensive staff. So you're not, when you're looking at coaches and who they could bring with them, and then players that could come with as a result. I think Jedd's going to be tasked with similar to what Kalen is at Alabama, where you can bring some of your offense guys, bring Brennan Carroll, bring the guys you want to bring, but you really got to get it right on defense, because that's one thing DeBoer. It got better as the season went along, but like with any better of a defense, this team is a national championship in its case right now.
So I'm with you, and why I would say I'm optimistic about the defensive side of the ball is because Jedd Fisch just showed that he can get it right. He said, "Okay, here's what I can do," and he did a really great job of that. And let's be real. I know you and I both have a lot of thoughts about Johnny Hanson. I don't know if we ever thought like, he's going to be a really good defensive coordinator. I can't say that's just from his track record. That's ever something that I thought we would have to talk about. So he proved that he can get that kind of hire right. I think that's really impressive.
Well, part of me wonders, and again, because you know this as well as I do, that, like think back to the 2018, 2019 UW team that went to the Rose Bowl against Ohio State. Like people would say, like, oh wow, like this wide receiver group is great. Chris Peterson was coaching the receivers during the bowl game. Like it wasn't Matt Lubick. People credited Matt Lubick with the success. It's like no. So how? And I'm not saying that's exactly the case with Johnny Hanson, but how much of that was more Dwayne Akina or some other coaches on that staff than Johnny Hanson? Because again, when he made the move to Texas, I believe he took a demotion. Now again, it is Texas, so you're moving up in the world.
It's like because it's a co-DC with Kwiatkowski. Yeah.
You think Kwiatkowski is going to let? You think he's going to let that happen? So exactly. So, but he's the recruiter of that mix, right? He's the I'll go, hit the road, do X amount on the recruiting trail to build the relationships, make things happen, get you the players you want, and then you actually do the coaching, right?
Right.
That could be a Pete Carroll thing where it's like, hey, Pete can obviously get some names and make some calls, but he doesn't have to be the one grinding out on the trail, but he still gets to be involved and still coaching. So there's plenty of ways to make that work. And I think, honestly, that would be a fantastic, savvy move by Fisch. It's like, why not? I mean, unless Pete literally says, like, no, I absolutely don't want to get back into it, but he just seems like this. That would almost be a perfect fit. He doesn't have to be the head coach, doesn't have to do all the press conference duties, can kind of meet with the media. I mean, imagine Chuck Morrell getting replaced by Pete Carroll. Like, my word. Like, just think about it.
You and I would have so much fun talking to Pete Carroll. That'd be fantastic.
And that would almost be like a fun way for him to end his career, right? Where he gets to coach in the same city with his son without being the head coach and have to be the guy. and gets to coach with one of his friends in Jedd Fisch and help him build this program to where it should be, or, build it to where Kalen DeBoer left it. Absolutely. Right. So by the way, I should probably clarify here, not reporting that, I'm just, I do want to clarify for anybody that says, hey, Lars reported this. Like, no, I'm just saying you can connect some dots here if you want.
So I kind of want to end on this note here from Eric Johnson, where he says the former UW coaching option seems to be dry. Who could they even hire that bleeds purple and gold? I don't know if it's necessarily that, where it's get somebody in the room who you trust, who is promising, right? Where it doesn't have to be like somebody who has UW ties, because it's all about building a coaching tree with what this contract looks like it can be. Maybe Jedd Fisch will be here a while. Where that's kind of what it seems like is going to happen, where you can do that and then just say, okay, well, I'm going to bring in new guys and create my own coaching tree and try to create a legacy here, where that's very possible. And then you don't necessarily have to worry about just saying, okay, I need a guy who already knows this program, where you can, because this is going to sound like a shot, and I really don't mean it to be, but it's not like Arizona has any kind of history compared to what Washington has. Like, I know it's old, it's the 80s, it's the 90s, it is what it is, but it's not like Arizona had that kind of history, and he still did a really great job getting a fantastic staff down there, recruiting really well, and selling that program. So I think that there are a lot of good things on the horizon for UW football, and as much of a bummer as the Kalen DeBoer hire is, or losing Kalen DeBoer is, this is the best possible outcome from all this.
And the fact that it happened rather quickly. And to your point, to my point, when I said Tuesday was probably the date, I was saying that it's kind of like a stopgap, maybe like they announce it tomorrow, because we haven't seen an official we haven't seen an official release. But so I'm assuming the official release comes out tomorrow morning, introduction Tuesday, which would be exactly what I said. Not taking any credit for it, but just, right on the money. Because again, it had to happen quickly. Clearly, Jedd Fisch was a target all along. They explored a couple of the phone calls, did their due diligence, gave Ryan Grubb a shot, but this is exactly who Troy Dannen knew he needed to get, and he got him. And so I think for all the people asking, hey, is Dannen up for this? Yeah, clearly he is. Like, he clearly knew what was coming. He knew it was coming, and it was just unfortunate that it had to happen in the way that it did. But that's not on Troy Dannen. I mean, what are you going to fire Kalen DeBoer because he's not accepting your extension? Just like, that's not going to happen. So, like, just it happened how it happened, and Washington's in a better place for it.
Absolutely. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate you joining us on the Sunday afternoon. Seems like, hey, after, what was cloudy skies a couple of days ago, things might be better than you think. So make sure you stay tuned in with us here on Locked On Huskies for all the announcements, everything that could be coming down the pipeline, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So until then, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you just stay right here with us and never miss an episode. Please make sure to like the video, leave us a comment down below, leave us a 5-star review for audio only. That all really helps the show out a lot. We really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time.